It is March 21st, 2025, and I am out here in Texas for 6 days. First Books on the Bed trip to Texas, and I could not be more excited to be here. This is a chance to open more doors for friendships and book sharing and learning and being in a completely different landscape, which is rejuvenating, especially in March. It's green here, it's warm, it's sunny, and back home in the mountains of Western North Carolina, it's still a little bit chilly and things haven't bloomed. So I feel really grateful to be here for many reasons. But the main reason is I get to talk to these exceptional authors who all live relatively close in Texas. So I get to do this on one swing. And the first author I'm visiting today in Austin is one of my favorite writers in the whole wide world. And that would be Elizabeth Crook. But before I go see her in Austin this afternoon, I am spending the morning in her hometown of San Marcos, Texas. Anybody that knows me personally or has spent the last few years following along with the 2 podcasts that I've done, they understand how important it is for me to visit these points of origin for people's stories. So I'm here this morning in San Marcos because this place, but particularly her childhood home, play a really important role in her memory and who she has become. But most importantly, there are memories of her family here, and in particular, her parents. Her father, by all accounts, was an extraordinary human being and really intriguing person. I can't wait to talk with her about him. Her mother as well, there's this reverence and respect for these people, and this is where it all began. And so when you have this place so close that is important to the person you're going to visit, I think, why not stop over there? And I'm going to be honest, San Marcos is delightful. I'm actually surprised at how much I like this town. So it's just cool to be able to see a new place and kind of fall in love with it as you're going around. But I also need to give a shout out to our mutual friend, the owner of Lemuria Bookstore in Jackson, Mississippi, John Evans. Because without him, this meeting today in Austin, in all likelihood, wouldn't have happened. When I got the idea for Books on the Bed a few years ago, and I was thinking about all these authors that I would want to visit, I also solicited advice from some friends that I really trust. And one of those is John Evans. So I called him up. I said, hey, I have this idea. Do you have recommendations for authors that I should visit? And on that first phone call, he gave me 2 people. The first has already been on Books on the Bed, the wonderful Jerry Wilson of Jackson, Mississippi, who I adore and love her stories. She's such a great writer. And the second one was Elizabeth Crook. Now, I'm not sure John understood this when he gave Elizabeth's name to me, but he gave me one of the greatest gifts of all, and that is one of my favorite writers of all time, a writer who I will put in my esteemed class of Eudora Welty and Willa Cather and Wilma Dykeman. These are, for me, life-defining authors. Authors that will stay with you until you die, and maybe even in the afterlife, if that exists. That's how much I love Elizabeth's writing. And so I have to give praise to John, because I wouldn't have heard about her. But that's what's great about being part of the book world. Yeah, it's my job, but just even as a reader, there's so many connections to be made through shared love of stories. And if you just put something out there, you never know what relationships are going to be formed because you shared a book or an author. And so I'm just so thankful for John and have to give him props for making this meeting happen. He was totally right. He knew I was going to love Elizabeth, and boy, was that an understatement. But I'm really humbled to be here with Elizabeth because I think she embodies all of the qualities I love about writers. She's a self-honest person. She knows who she is as a writer. And she's not trying to be something she's not. She loves writing about Texas, so there's literally only one book that isn't about Texas. And that's why I'm in San Marcos, because I want to understand, what is this attachment to this place? How could she love a place so deeply that she writes all of these novels about it? I think that's so beautiful. And then she stayed. She could have moved anywhere in the world, and she's here in Texas still. So she's true to self. She knows what she loves, and she knows what she's interested in. She knows what story she wants to tell. And she takes care of these stories from the research process to the writing all the way to the end for years, sometimes a decade. And people might say, oh, well, that just means she's slow. But I think we are so obsessed with creating content, churning it out, useless, shallow nothingness that just gets our name out there. To have someone in this world that takes their time with something and puts so much love and care and curiosity into it, I, for one, am emboldened to keep doing what I do because people like Elizabeth Crook exist. I am so glad she's in the world, and I would tell anybody that wants to write or create to look at her as a role model for how you can create things that last and do it in your own way and not feel pressured to do things that might seem more popular or you think are going to get you more notoriety. It's just make the things you really want to make, write the books you really want to write. And so I just admire her so deeply for the way that she's written these books and the fact that literally all of them are good. But anyway, you can tell this means a lot to me. And I'm so excited that I get to have this meeting with her and share time in her home state, not too far from where she grew up, and explore books through this conversation with her. I cannot wait to see what she picks as her books on the bed. Her mind is so beautiful and smart, and I know that you're going to be excited listening to it too. So I'm going to enjoy the rest of my morning in San Marcos, get ready to head over to Austin, and I'll see you when I sit down with Elizabeth. You're listening to Books on the Bed, where I travel through the country asking our hosts, if I came to your town and stayed at your house, what books would you put on my bed? Each host will share 6 books for me to carry with me on the journey of my life. And I'm here to share those books with you. As we go, we're building a digital library with every book put on every bed across the country. And who knows, maybe someday, the world. We are trying to share as many diverse stories as possible to part a curtain between us and bring us closer to each other. We hope these books and conversations make a meaningful difference in your life. Thank you for listening and being with us on this journey. I mean, this room is like the ideal for this conversation.
Okay.
That's my favorite thing about coming to authors' houses. Mm-hmm. The bookshelves and the messy book stacks, everything just gives.
Yeah, you get a sense of who
I got so excited coming in here because I have stacks everywhere. I have stacks in closets.
Yeah.
And random corners. So I get it. And when John told me about you, I was thinking about, that's exactly why I love bookstore owners, booksellers, and I love being a bookseller because your name might have never gotten to me. Truly. That might have been the only person.
Oh, I'm sure it wouldn't have because I'm not like a bestseller,
You should be.
Yeah.
I personally treat you like a bestseller.
Well, I appreciate it.
And I have to say, over the last, it was a couple years ago that I called John, told him I was starting Books on the Bed, and it was you and Jerry Wilson from Mississippi that he told me about first. He's like, truly, you would love them.
Yeah.
And so I've read all of your books since then, and people say I'm dramatic. I say what I feel. But if I ever have children and they want to learn how to write, I'm having them read your books.
Wow.
I
really appreciate that.
I think what I love is you've stayed true to yourself.
The books are still there. That's right.
You've taken your time. They're incredible books.
Thank you.
And what I've loved, and now being in Texas, I really believe when I come to Texas, when I think of Texas, your stories are.
Well, I guess you saw the tower. Yeah.
Yeah, they make me so curious.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I know nothing about this state. We did not study the Texas Rebellion.
Well, of course you wouldn't. Yeah, why would you?
When I read Promised Lands, I was like,
where'd you grow up in Ohio?
Dayton.
In Dayton, okay.
So it's
my editor was from Ohio as well. Yeah. He grew up in Columbus.
Yeah. So my family also lived in Columbus. They lived everywhere, Columbus, Toledo, Dayton. But it's just it was like going to history class again when I got to Michigan for college. And so reading your books were like, oh my gosh, this is exciting. I'm learning all these new things about a place that feels foreign to me.
I can't believe you read that many of them. That's amazing.
Even I'm staying with my cousin and her husband up in Gerald, and we were talking last night, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm from a place you probably have never heard of. I was like, well, try me. And he's like, Lockhart. I was like, oh, but
barbecue,
I do.
Right, exactly.
But I do know, and that's because of Monday.
Yeah.
And so it's been such a joy. And anyway, you're one of my favorite writers ever. I'm so thankful for John for telling me about you. And anyway, to thank you for the gift of your books over the last couple of years. I've gotten you some gifts.
Oh, my goodness.
This is how I start my interviews.
Oh, wow.
With gifts of thanks. So you can open it, and I'll tell you about these books and why I got them for you.
Okay. All right.
So this one is actually an exchange, because I gave her, actually, the copy I got of The Which Way Tree at your old schoolmate's used bookstore in Taos.
Oh.
Remember I told you about her?
Yes, you did. That's right.
So I got a copy of The Which Way Tree and gave it to Rachel.
The house is on fire. Oh, this looks lovely.
So the reason I got her your book and now you her book is similar to what you were just saying. Like, I mean, she takes her time. I mean, the research for this is based on the authority book on the Richmond Theater
really
Fire
good.
in 1811. Her care with history and her attention to 4 people who were not on the historical record because they were slaves or women. Okay. And so one of them is Patrick Henry's daughter, and there's a young slave girl and an older slave man, and then one of the theater company members who sees all of this go down from backstage and is part of that. And so the point was, though, like she brings you into this story from perspectives that were not given in 1811.
Right.
Over 70 people died. I think 50 of them were women, like an absurd. And so the question was why? And Meredith Henny Baker, who wrote the history book on the 1811 theater fire, just gave her all of her notes and research. And so this book is just like up your alley. And she was in PR for 20 years. I really love her backstory.
What a nice gift.
Yeah, Rachel Beanland, The House is on Fire. I know it's a novel. But
yeah. Well, and my mom will like it too. I mean, she does read a lot of fiction. So I'll share it with her.
I think you will really, really love this. So that's the first one. The second one, well, we were just talking about her, and I brought her up when I saw you at the Mississippi Book Festival, I think.
Paper is so pretty. I wish I could save it. I don't think it's possible. Yeah.
That's okay.
Really,
it's for presentation.
Yes.
The good stuff's inside. But you can try to save it if you want.
I don't think it'll work. Really nice. Okay. Oh, what is this one? Call It Horses. Lovely.
So the reason I got you this one is I love Jessie Van Eerden. She's also been, both of them have been books on the bed so far.
Okay.
So there's some crossover here within the project. But this one goes from West Virginia. Mm-hmm. It's a road trip story with 3 unlikely people from West Virginia at different stages in their lives. And it's that one of them is sick and wants to die out in New Mexico. Oh. So they take this, they're outrunning their grief. But the thing is, it comes through Texas. And I know you've also written, with the Night Journal about the West and the Southwest in New Mexico.
New Mexico.
So I just felt like this. Oh, and it's also in epistolary form.
Nice.
And because of your last 2 books being in the same format, I was like, okay, maybe you would dig this.
This is great. No, both of these look like fantastic books. They're going to make me want to read fiction.
I think so. People have loved those so far that I've given. The last one is very, very particular because you are the only other person I know that has had their life impacted by Jackie Kennedy, Jacqueline Onassis.
Yeah.
And this book is the only other person that I know that has had a similar indelible, life-changing relationship with her, although this one is sad, I will admit, for the history of it. You might recognize the last name when you see it, but it's a poetry book.
Oh, wow. No, I don't know this name. I don't.
So Lee Stockdale's father was Grant Stockdale, who killed himself 10 days after JFK was assassinated. Oh. They were really good friends. Oh. He was the ambassador to Ireland at one point. I think they were living in Miami at the time. And so all these years later, Lee Stockdale writes this poetry book. Before I even worked at City Lights, I went to his reading for this book because I was like, wow, he's like has a really interesting background. I'm curious about the Kennedy connection. But one of these poems is about what happened. So his father killed himself. He goes on, lives his life, but he's really struggling to form an identity and like get over that. I mean, he called it a concrete slab that was on top of him. Oh. But when he was driving cabs in New York City years later, after the assassination and his father died, he randomly picks up Jackie Kennedy in his cab.
Oh my God.
And so there's this really special moment where like she recognized him. And then even in that short bit of time, she treated him like one of her own kids.
Oh,
and it was
wow.
like he had been running from the Kennedy name. He said he hated the Kennedys.
Yeah.
Because of what he felt like they did to his family.
Right.
So at any rate, I was like,
fascinating, yeah.
that connection I wouldn't have with any other person. But because of her
she was
editing your
lovely
first
to me.
book.
She was amazing to me. Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know that you'll read poetry, but I just thought because of that.
I do.
Yeah, that you would appreciate where he's coming from.
And my sister is a published poet with beautiful poems.
I'd love to
Salt Moon.
to read it at some point.
Yeah. You know what? I probably have an extra copy. I'll give you. They're really amazing. She's only done one book, but it was really well received. Let me see if I've got one right there.
Sure.
So I won't forget to do it.
I'll remember to tell you.
Okay. All right.
Because I want to read it now.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm not going to turn that down.
Yeah.
But anyway.
She lives in North Carolina. So,
oh, yeah, that's right. Out east. Yeah, because we talked about that a few months ago back in Mississippi. So, yeah, anyway, I thought you would enjoy these
Those
books.
are really nice gifts. Very, very thoughtful.
Yeah, and I just found, like, I had read an article from the San Marcos Register from March of 91, which was a month before I was born. And it was, you had talked about the process of getting your first book published. How Jacqueline Onassis calls you up. I mean, like, that was a crazy story. I did not know that.
It's a crazy story. Yeah, it's a crazy story. And she was lovely to me. She was absolutely wonderful to me.
But, you know, looking back on that moment, I mean, that was what, 34 years ago?
Yeah.
Wait, no, 34 years ago this month?
Yeah.
I think it was March 3rd, 91, or, well, that I read the article. That was when it came out.
Right. So, that book was published in 91, the first book, The Raven's Bride.
And you had said something really funny. You said it was not it was a, oh, I need to get this quote. I saved it. It's so good. And I forgot my paper. Oh, yeah, it was not an ego-building experience.
It was not. I had a lot of rejections. Yeah.
But how cool to have it.
Yeah.
Just finally get out into the world. But now, like, I mean, reflecting back, we were just talking about, you don't know how many books you have left in you. You take a long time to write books, which I love, because to me, then I appreciate them that much more. Like, I was actually pacing myself because I
can't believe you read them all. That is just so nice.
I'm telling you, seriously, I love them so much. But it was, you savor it when you know that the other person's not just churning them out.
Right. No, I'm definitely not just churning them out. Yeah, I wish I could churn them out, but this is just the pace at which I can do it. I don't.
But I'm curious, looking back at that moment, like if she had not called,
right,
and published that book, would you
I would have kept going. I would have kept going.
I figured you would.
I had so many. I think I had 11 rejections at that time. I would have gone on to number 12, number 13, number 14. I would have kept rewriting it. I would have, until I got it right, So.
But thank goodness you didn't have to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Thank goodness I didn't have to do that.
Gosh, I mean, yeah, it's just so cool to think that, your career from there, like we all got all these other books because that moment just finally happened. It was just so funny to look back at that. I had no idea with that connection. And then also, like, you have a really good community of writers here, it seems. Oh, like Stephen Harrigan, like.
Yeah.
A personal editor, it seems.
Basically, we look at each other's stuff as we go. He's the only person I share with as I go.
That's a pretty huge resource.
And and he is, because he taught at the Mishner Center for many years, and he really is just the best brainstormer, the best editor. He just has an eye for, what's working, what's not, and how to fix it. It isn't just like an editor that says there's something a little wrong here. He's like, you know what? This would work. He really has the ideas of how to fix it, and that's rare. So he's been invaluable to me.
Yeah,
so,
that's so cool. Well, and another thing that, before we get to the books, I do like to speak personally with people because, I'm here, not far from where you grew up. I actually spent this morning at your childhood home.
You're kidding.
And I ate lunch at the park named for your parents.
Yeah.
I got some breakfast tacos and I sat on the water.
Yeah.
And I went to your house because you had said something in a really, really great article back in like 2010, probably, that you wrote for some Texas magazine.
Yeah, Texas Monthly.
Yeah, Our House.
Yeah.
I thought that was a delightful essay. And, You had said something, though, that I guess I can't relate to because I didn't grow up in a childhood home. And I know that wasn't the only place you lived, but you said when you think of San Marcos, you think of that house, not the
Probably
town.
is basically the only place I lived, as a kid. I mean, till I graduated, except for the brief period away when my dad was in the Johnson administration.
And it's a beautiful home. I actually liked San Marcos. It was the first time I'd ever been there.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, that place, and I want to know where people come from because I need to know what they saw. Some semblance of hey, this is what their life was like. This was the trees that were around. This was the backyard. But what makes that house so special in your memory?
I wish you'd told me. My mom would have let you in.
Yeah.
You could have wandered around.
There were people working. I thought about just being hey, can I go in?
I would have just called and said, hey, Mom, open the door. Yeah.
I'm too Midwestern, and I would feel like that would be intrusive. But anyway, I'm really curious that because that's a pretty powerful statement to say that it's the house, not the town.
Yeah.
That you remember.
Yeah. Well, because the house was the center. I mean, it was the center of all the kids on the street. Especially after my dad put the swimming pool in. It was just where everybody came. But even before that, it was, kind of the gathering spot for so many people. We always had a bunch of people in the house. I mean, just growing up, my parents, my dad was the president of the San Marcos Baptist Academy. And so we had all the academy people coming and going all the time. And there was just a lot of activity. I didn't need to hang out in the town that much.
It felt like its own world.
It felt like its own world, yeah. The house.
And, and it's pretty exceptional. I really wanted to walk through the garden.
My mom is still there. She's 93. In fact, I'm heading after this interview straight there because my sister's in town.
Wow. And I didn't know she was still there.
Yeah.
So missed opportunity. But yeah, it's just such a beautiful house. And I thought that was so cool the way that you detailed the history of how your parents found it. And it was going to take a lot of work. And then, but that your father had this vision.
He always had big plans. I mean, he always had a big vision of what... My mom said she would have stayed happily provincial.
Yeah.
And he dragged her out of her, very provincial thinking and broadened that world with her kind of kicking and screaming a lot of the way,
Yeah.
And as a consequence, we were kind of dragged around from there to Washington to Australia. And then when Nixon was elected, he had all of the Johnson appointees come home right away. And so then we just came trailing back to San Marcos, without, my dad didn't have a job, but we had that house,
Yeah.
I think they talked about moving places where my dad would have more opportunities, but they knew how, they just felt it was a good upbringing for us, a small town, nice people, And we had friends, a lot of friends. And so, they stayed. Yeah.
Oh, man, it's so cool. It was cool to see that and to read that essay and now understand when you were a kid, like when the pool was getting built.
Yeah, yeah.
And when Sam Peckinpah came.
Oh, yeah.
That story was nuts.
He's a horrible man. He was a horrible man.
But he stayed in your guest house, right? Like the one that's to the left in the back?
Till Mom threw him out.
It was that bad?
Well, no, he stayed. No, I'm wrong. She had Steve McQueen.
Oh, that's right.
Because he was having an affair. Right. No, she wanted to throw out Sam Peckinpah, but by that time we'd already gotten rid of Steve McQueen for his, what she felt like was bad behavior. He was having that affair, and she didn't want us to be exposed to it. We were young. But we liked him so much better than we liked Sam Peckinpah because he was mean. He scared us.
Yeah. How many people get to say that? That you were close enough to even form that opinion.
I know. Yeah.
And how long did he stay?
Oh, well, they stayed much longer than we wanted them to. It was like maybe, I don't know, over a month. I mean, they were filming there for a while. And then, he was not happy with our act. He let us be in that one scene. And then, none of us could act. and then he had to keep doing cut. Yeah, exactly.
Was like driving him nuts.
Yeah. And then.
Was it the bank robbery scene?
Yeah, because we're in there for just a few seconds. I have pictures of it. But
oh my gosh, that's so cool.
And so, he said he would shoot our dog if she lifted her head again in the bank robbery scene. Exactly.
I could not believe what I was reading.
And so then we were scared that he was going to kill our dogs. And so we would take them out on leashes.
That's so sad.
I know.
And then he's there, so you can't, you're just on the defense. But you said it was his girlfriend at the time that was with him?
Yes,
that was
nice? Joey was her name. She was very young, and she was British. And she was really sweet to us. We liked her a lot. He told us the barn, the place, the guest house, always called it the barn because it was originally, a carriage house barn, was haunted. But she was lovely. Yeah, what I remember about her was that she didn't shave under her arms, and she would do these chin-up, pull-ups on the diving board. It was like, wow, because we didn't know hair grew there. It was just like, look at that. We would watch from the windows, my sister and I, to see her doing the pull-ups. And she was beautiful. She was a lovely person. Yeah.
Wow.
I always wondered what happened to her, where she is.
I know.
It was nice to us. It's one of those fleeting things in your life that comes and goes.
But it's just amazing to think of all the things that happened in your young life at that house.
Because of my dad. I mean, he was the one who said, oh, yeah, we want the movie crew to stay here. That's fine. That's great. When they ask us, he was always the one coming up with big plans. Yeah. Well,
and speaking of your dad, I did not know when I first got introduced to you. It was probably the third novel that I had read of yours that I finally was like, okay, let me look a little bit more. Because I knew I really wanted to interview you. I didn't know when it would happen. So I poked around. I was like, oh, yeah, her dad is a really interesting character. Lived a heck of a life. And then I stumbled upon another essay that you wrote about him and the school board because of the dress code. And that was one of the best things I've read. I loved that story because I think it says a lot about your family. That one saga.
Yes.
And your father. And I know that he's had a really big influence on your life.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I was reading this and I was like, this guy is just, he's bored, I guess.
Exactly what happened.
And so the dress code is unconstitutional.
Yep.
So let's just
take on the whole system.
And that was such an exciting read. But it was interesting, you talking about your own father's very big personality, his courage, and in contrast with you at the time and probably still, right?
I just wanted to make A's. And not get kicked out of school because I was standing up for some vague constitutional right that I didn't understand at that time. Yeah.
But you actually ended up on the committee.
Yes.
Of one of the students that had to debate.
That had to say, yes, exactly, stand up.
And that moment you were like, oh gosh, my father would be disappointed if I don't say something. But also, I just want to get good grades and kind of exist.
Yeah, because some of my teachers had kind of turned on me.
Yeah, which is crazy because you were so young. Teachers are wild.
Sixth grade, yeah.
And then they tried to burn a cross in your yard?
Yeah, they did.
But failed?
But it didn't light. My dad was so disappointed. He was like, I always wanted to have a cross burned in my yard. And he said, and the damn thing didn't light. He was just...
That he wanted it to be more aflame was
right.
I mean, and I'm just so... I was so curious about your father's life. And that saga, you ended it with something that I've been thinking about a lot. It was a very touching piece. And, even how your family was different from him, but yet you were all part of it, similar to getting that house in San Marcos. But you said, after the dress code was abolished, my father moved on to other interests.
Yes.
He lived another quarter of a century, standing up for causes and taking up for people. He was my touchstone. He was my standard for courage. When I was timid or muddled, he shamed me into action. I came to understand him better as I grew older. I had always known that the way to secure his love was to earn his respect, and at some indefinable point along the way, I realized I had succeeded. The effort to hold on to it has been the animating force in my life. I would not have preferred a father who signed the piece of paper.
Yeah.
Meaning, saying yes to the dress code.
Yes.
I mean, that's big words. Animating force in my life. So I really, though, because we're here, we're so close to where you grew up, and your father had such an instrumental role in who you've become. I'd like to just talk about how he's influenced your life, even all these years since he's been gone.
Yeah, oh gosh.
I know
I get tearful. I get tearful. I mean, he died because he went to Ethiopia when the worst of one of the famines, and was there under the auspices of the Episcopal Church, helping to set up an orphanage. And he was told, when you walk through the camps, hold your hands up, because the kids will all grab your hands, and there are a lot of diseases they're carrying. And he wouldn't do it. And so he got hepatitis B. He always had these little places on his hands that he was kind of picking at. And, anyway, he got hepatitis B, and he lived another 12 years with, different health problems because of that. And then passed away with no regrets. I mean, he said he had no regrets about any of that. But, he was only, the older I get and the closer I get to the age he was, I realize how young he was, because he was just 72, which, it was a good long life.
Yeah.
And, in retrospect, I don't think he would have been a happy older person because he was used to when he would walk into the room, he wasn't a big guy at all. But when he would walk into a room, there was a sense of gravitas. The power shifted, toward him. And people listened to what he had to say. I think that if he had become old, that would have changed. I see that change with people where the younger people begin to be the ones around whom everything circles. And so he would have surrendered some of that sense, I think, involuntarily and grudgingly and not a happy way. And so, as much as I've missed him, I just can't see him having been a jovial old guy, at all. He would, I think, been irritable and unhappy for being old,
Yeah.
And, my mother has gone on, she's now 93. Wow. She's gone on, lived another nearly 30 years and happily. It's worked out. But they were a team. They had the same sense of responsibility toward the world, they just believed in the same things. They came from very different backgrounds, but they believed in the same things. And he still is a very important figure to me, even though he's been gone a long time. You know?
It just seems like such a special relationship and a special person to have, because even though you're so different, it's interesting when you talk about getting courage from somebody and or even like his gravitas, like coming into a room and people listening. But in your own way, I feel that way when I turn to your book. Like my attention is just there because it's power. But like you found
my own voice
way in the world. And
voice.
Sometimes it can be hard to grow up with someone who has that really big personality.
Yeah.
And you might be more shy, but I think it's cool that you've still been able to make your own way with what he's taught you without trying to become who he was.
And with a much smaller platform. With books, it's a smaller platform. We all gravitate to what we do well, and kind of learn to steer away from what we don't do well. And, I couldn't have been him.
Do you feel like, though, your father's own, you might have even said this, but the bold-headedness that he had with the things that he did, do you feel like that's why you were not able to give up on the books? Is because you just wanted,
success was a big thing for me. I think I was always driven to, maybe you could use the word perform, produce, not, I never saw him ever give up on anything. And who's to say whether there's an innate quality that makes somebody bullheaded, or whether that is a learned thing, or whether that is in order to please other people. I'm sure it's a mixture of everything. And gaining his, he was very proud of my books. And during writing the first one, The Raven's Bride, he was ill during a lot of that time.
Yeah.
And so, he only lived to see my first two books published. And we have a place in the hill country, the family ranch, and we went out there and spent a lot of time when he was sick. And I, kind of moved out there, and my mom and I were there for months. And I would write upstairs during the day and come down and read to him what I'd written at night. And he would critique it. And so, it was just a very powerful influence, and sometimes, he had really wrong-headed ideas, and I had to learn to say, that's a really bad idea, Dad. This is why I'm not doing that.
You can't do everything that...
Yeah, exactly, and his ideas were always big wrong ideas. If they were wrong, they were big wrong ideas, Like, why don't you make this book in the Civil War instead of the Texas Railroad? It was always something. But, the subject for my first novel, I was I wanted to write about a woman in history that had been sort of overlooked or just sort of not written about. And he's the one who suggested. He had just read a book called The Raven by
I didn't
Marky
realize.
James. Yeah.
Wow.
And that was, a Pulitzer Prize winning biography of Sam Houston. And he said Sam Houston's first wife is sort of a mystery. And I remember he used the word an enigma. And I didn't know the word enigma. So I went and looked it up and thought, I want to write about her. That's interesting.
Oh, guys, it's giving me chills like that moment. Because now having read the book, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was it.
Yeah. So he suggested that topic.
What an enigmatic character.
Yeah.
Like, I knew nothing about that relationship.
She was fascinating and still made that bid for anonymity before she died. I mean, she requested all of her papers, likenesses, everything destroyed. Who does that,
I know, it's so cool.
And and just carried that secret of what happened in that marriage she carried it to the grave. And Sam Houston did too. So to this day, nobody really knows. I mean, I have a good sense of what happened, but nobody really knows privately what went on between the two of them. And it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, the mystery,
Well, and the influence it had on history, because he wouldn't have been in Texas.
No.
And the Texas Revolution, would have been a very different thing.
Yeah.
And ended differently.
Well,
and
it's
who knows
interesting
if we would still be part of Mexico,
Well, because then you jump the next book.
Yeah.
You follow that
I followed it.
storyline. And I think I remember you said your mother was like, your second book was better, right?
Yeah, that's still her favorite book. From all of the ones I've written, I'm never going to write one that she likes more than Promised Lands. Yeah.
But gosh, did I enjoy that. I mean, there were the first battle scene when Hugh and Toby end up with Fannin.
Oh.
And
was that the grass fight? You're good. I mean, I haven't written that.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
In several decades,
they ended up, right? They Miles Kenner and everybody went off to get help, but then they didn't come back, and so they were trapped.
Right.
That battle scene.
Oh yeah. Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
Oh my gosh. I can't even describe how enjoyable and satisfying of a read that was. But that's why I loved kind of, you take this smaller story, right? Of this interpersonal relationship, this mysterious person, but then you follow it to like this huge
epic, big fat
the Texas
novel,
Rebellion.
right? Exactly.
And I mean, but it made so much sense though.
Yeah.
And so that's why it was just so cool. And that's why it's been fun to follow your...
And then the different thing that I did, because I got uncomfortable writing The Raven's Bride, because I was having to, I was really dealing with imposing, or giving my characters motive, why did she leave? Why did everything they said, and dialogue and everything else. So I was dealing with these characters in the form of, a biographical novel, basically. And you never know if you got it right. You never know how far off you are. You really can, you start to see those ghosts that are looking over your shoulder. I mean, I've written about this. And, and it gets uncomfortable because you think, okay, now I'm defining them in a way, that may be wrong. And so I've never again written using historical figures as first person, as characters that, not first person, but basically the central characters. But they're peripheral, and the story, often incorporates them, but it's not about them. Yeah. It's about my fictional characters in the other books, and that's why with The Raven's Bride, you can see so many of the historical figures from the Texas Revolution on both sides, the Mexican army and Sam Houston and Fannin and all that crowd. But I'm not dealing with them in terms of, giving them a sense of motive and their thought processes.
Yeah, probably a good idea. That would be hard to do over and over again. And then you would just be asking the question, am I getting it right?
Yeah.
Because at a certain point, you just have to be like, well, I will never know that.
Right.
And but it was really, it was a great first book. And I just have loved following your own curiosities. I think the thing I respect most about you is your immovable centering of Texas, in your stories. And I'm not here to debate whether or not people that do a bunch of different things are better. It's like not about that. It's just like for you, it feels so self-honest. And there should be a class on Texas history taught just based on your sources that you can go to the back of your novels and
look at,
right. I mean, what is it? John C. Duvall's.
That's a good book. Yeah. Interesting. Fascinating book. Yeah.
I would never heard of it if it wasn't for you. So, you have these really interesting history books.
Interesting thing about that is that my seventh grade history teacher, Mr. Price, whom I loved, and still love, he's a great man. When the story about the dog that ends up, the sad story, I won't say what happens, but
Sure.
it's a sad story. And I got it from John C. Duvall's book, which he didn't write about what happened, but in the foreword, his daughter wrote what really happened, because he had changed the ending because it was too sad of an ending.
Yeah.
I got that from that book when I started my research. And so when I published Promised Lands, Mr. Price came to one of my book signings. And so he said, I'm not surprised you used John C. Duvall's story of the dog in this book, because you loved that book in seventh grade. And I said,
oh my gosh.
I said, Mr. Price, I didn't read that book in seventh grade. And he said, you read my copy of that book. He said, you liked it so much when I read parts of it in class, you took it home. I have your handwritten notes in my book. And I said, I had no idea that
That is wild.
You don't know what influence these teachers have later on in life. I mean, what drew me back to that same period? Where did that initial interest come? And so I thought, I found this great book, John C. Duvall, and what is it? Good Old Times in Texas. I can't remember exactly.
Early Times
in Texas, right? And how interesting it is. No memory of having ever seen it before.
That is nuts to think about, how it's like something is dormant and just waiting to come back again.
Yeah.
It's not as if...
And you don't even know what the origin was.
That's wild. Yeah. How cool of a moment, though.
I was like so surprised, He said, I have your notes in my copy to prove.
That's so funny. And yet another example of, like, even though you didn't know it, it made sense.
Yeah,
Someone could tell you, like, well, duh, of course you used this.
Yeah.
But I think it's just cool that, that one's from grade school, but all of these sources you've drawn from, it just feels like, look at this room full of books. You just love reading about Texas history and bringing it to life in these stories. And I've like I said, I've become fascinated. Similar with Rachel Beanland's book, I read Meredith Henny Baker's history book of that because Rachel shouted her out, like that she helped her.
Yeah,
so it's fun to see what influenced the book in terms of history or any other nonfiction. And I just, your books have brought me so much joy, and they've been good friends to me. And by extension, you have been. So it's so fun to be talking about this with you. But I want to be able to get to the books on the bed that you've chosen, because we've talked about a lot of things that have informed your work so far. Yeah. And I've been curious, are there going to be books from Texas history, or what's going to go on with this stack?
This was the hard assignment. I am for one thing, as I have admitted to you, I don't read fiction these days that much. You see what I'm reading, it's...
Yeah, so we got the trail drivers of Texas. We've got Reports Committee of Investigations sent in 1873 by the Mexican government of the frontier of Texas. But this is so great because it's you.
Yeah, exactly.
This makes sense. But so I was very excited about this stack.
This is what so anyway.
So let's see what you came up with. What's the first one you're going to talk about?
These, and this only counts as one, even though it's
okay.
two, because
plenty of people have done that.
The silver pennies and more silver pennies. But this is poetry. My mother read to the three of us kids for 3 hours every night. We each had about an hour. And we all had a story going, and we all sat in and listened to each other's stories. And so this was a huge influence, as you can imagine, on my writing. So these were the first, poems that, when I picked this book up, when I thought, what's been influential, and I started going through all my books, and I pulled these out, and I thought, I know all these poems by heart almost.
Wow.
Because she read them so many times. And they are lovely, and these were published way back when. You can see the age of the book.
I love that cover
Silver
and how
pennies,
old that book is.
I know.
It is worn.
And silver pennies, and then there was more silver pennies. This was more silver pennies. This was silver pennies. But the writer was so sensitive. She would publish these poems, and they are by famous poets. Here's Walter Delamere, Sarah Teasdale, Carl Sandburg, Rachel Lindsay, just, all kinds of different, very different writers. William Butler Yeats, really great poems. John Masefield, whom I loved. And she would have an explanation at the beginning to the children who were listening to these poems that would ask you questions about the situation in the poem. And her questions were way ahead of the time. A lot of them had to do with treatment of animals. A lot of them had to do with poverty. They had to do with things that introduced us to lives that were different from our own. My mom read us some tough books. Like The Little Match Girl. Oh my God, she, sells matches on the street for her dad, and she ends up freezing to death. Or The 100 Dresses. She read us sad stories and difficult stories, and I think, wanted us to know that not everybody had a safe life, like we did. And so a lot of these poems introduce that, and also they're just lyrical. Here's the first one, and I know this one totally by heart.
Yeah.
And it's by Walter Delamere. Someone came knocking. It's called Someone Came Knocking at My Wee Small Door. Someone came knocking. I'm sure, sure, sure. I listened. I opened. I looked to left and right, but naught there was a stirring in the still dark night. Only the busy beetle tapping in the wall. Only from the forest the screech owl's call. Only the cricket whistling while the dewdrops fall. So I know not who came knocking at all, at all, at all. And I always felt it was some ominous presence.
I got chills, yeah.
Yeah, you stay inside, And so, they were all, and just mysterious poems. There was one that I loved, The Green of the Lake Isle of Innisfree by Yeats is beautiful. One of the most beautiful. My grandmother put tiles out at the ranch house that have sections of a lot of poems.
Oh,
and this
so
is one
cool.
That's in one of the bedrooms. Yeah, it was just, I will arise and go now and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavement gray, I hear it in the heart's deep core. It's just beautiful. And
oh my gosh.
My mom read all of these to us over and
3
over
hours.
and over. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Sea Fever by Masefield, I love. In fact, in high school, I got so homesick for the water, for the beach, because my grandparents lived in Corpus, and we used to go all the time.
Oh, that's right.
And so I, in the spring, right before graduation, instead of doing my typing, you have all those lessons you have to pass typing. I just kept typing John Masefield's poems over and over again. And so I was failing. So the night before graduation, I had to go in and type up all my lessons because I had like page after page of Sea Fever and these different ones.
That's incredible.
that I had been typing. But there's one that is where is it, about the green glass beads that's just so mysterious and beautiful. But let me find that.
Yeah, take your time, find it. I really want to hear it.
Yeah, the green, that one, I wonder if it was in this one.
Wow, look how,
It's
I love
just,
how old that book is. Gosh.
I know, this book was published, I don't know when. Let me see, 1948. Just, amazing writers. And an introduction to lyrical writing, and to the sound of it, because she read aloud very expressively.
It's funny how we were just talking about you needing to do that.
I have to read aloud.
The sound has to...
Well, and it may be one reason I'm a slow writer, because I hear it as I write. Even as I'm typing, I am an email. I am reading it aloud. I am saying it aloud because my brain just does not get it.
Hey,
Otherwise,
we know where it comes from.
I don't know. I took one time in college. I tried to take a speed reading course to do better, and the teacher called me up afterwards and she said, "Look, you're the only one who's shown no improvement, and I'm going to have to fail you unless you drop the class." But she said, "How did you learn to read?" And I said, "Just sitting in my mom's lap while she read aloud. And she said, you are still reading at the same level, at the same, not the same level, but the same speed that she read aloud to you. You're hearing every single word, you're pronouncing every word. And I am. In my head, I'm pronouncing every single word. And so
that's making me realize that I did not get read to like that, but that's what I do. That's why it takes me forever.
Yeah, you hear every single word.
Every single word. And then I was told that was bad to get rid of it. Welty calls it the reader voice.
Right.
That you give the words, but I was like, everybody just told me bad. Don't hear anything.
They want you to read a group. Like,
I'm like, I can't.
Three different. Yeah, exactly.
It's impossible.
3 different words at a time, and like your eyes only stop on twice on a line. That's what they say. Because I tried Evelyn Woods when I was in high school to help me, and I just. My head, I couldn't process that way. I can't do it. No.
So this actually makes me feel better that someone else has struggled.
I think it does give a sense of, I think it gives a cleaner sense of dialogue, when you're writing, because you're hearing it as somebody speaking it, as your character saying it. But also for a reader, like you say, I try to say there's something good in it, but the fact is, it just means there are a whole lot of books I haven't had time to read so I don't know if there's anything good in it.
I think I have to dedicate an inordinate amount of time to books, because not only for this podcast, but just ones that I want to read. Yeah. And I never know if that's going to lead to, I ask a lot of people I love their books to do this, but not everybody, especially dead people. But it's like, I guess I'm lucky that I live in a place that there's nothing to do. I live in the woods and the mountains, so I just can read for 10 hours.
Most people wouldn't say that, but I get it.
So I like that. I can go slow as I want. No one's even looking at me. No one cares that I exist. So I'm just there. It's great.
Yeah.
Did you find it?
You can take your time. Give me one more second.
Okay.
It's called Overheard in a Salt Marsh. Harold Monroe. It's on page 11. Nymph, what are your beads? Green glass goblin, why do you stare at them? Give them me. No. Give them me. No. Then I will howl all night in the reeds, lie in the mud and howl for them. Goblin, why do you love them so? They are better than stars or water, better than voices of winds that sing, better than any man's fair daughter, your green glass beads on a silver ring. Hush, I stole them out of the moon. Give me your beads, I desire them. No, I will howl in a deep lagoon for your green glass beads, I love them so. Give them me, give them. No.
That's unsettling.
Great?
It's amazing.
Isn't it great? Because, it's like, you don't know what's going on. You don't know what they are. You don't know why he wants them so much.
But that language.
Yeah. Give them me. And, how many times in life do we run into this, And, no, is the answer. It's just, I just always loved that one as a child.
Those are dazzling.
Yeah.
And I love that you chose those.
So those are those.
What a start.
I'm
my
sort
gosh.
of culling as we go. The other one I read as an adolescent. Well, this one as a child, I just have to mention it because I loved it so much. It's called The Colt from Moon Mountain. It's about, it's an old book, obviously. Again, very old book. I read it it was read to me probably at age 6. Let me see. Says from Uncle Roy to Mary Beth, whose mother will understand it. Christmas 64. Aunt, sister, and Uncle Roy.
I love when there's writing in it. It's one of my favorite things about seeing these books. If people have the originals.
No, we always,
wow, that's so cool.
Anyway, and it's about this little girl who sees this, mysterious white colt, and it keeps coming back. But it turns out to be, and I know things have gone crazy with unicorn imagery, but it turns out to be a very special colt, and yet it has to be given its freedom. You see it. There's a sadness to it and a loveliness to it, and she knows that someday it's not going to come back. Oh. But the illustrations are just beautiful, And so anyway,
how cool!
Yeah, I really loved this old book, and you cannot find them except for like $100 falling apart like this. I did splurge on one for a niece and had it restored,
Oh,
But
that's so
there,
cool.
it's a beautiful story, and it's beautifully written. I mean, this author, Lathrop is the last name, and I don't know what else she's written. But anyway, that's it. But I don't know whether that counts as one of the six. So A Tale of Two Cities. So all of Dickens. So my mother read a lot of Dickens to us when we were little, and but then A Tale of Two Cities, I took off and started reading all of these, as I got older.
Yeah.
And I read these, and I loved all of the Bronte sisters. I have two sets of the Bronte sisters because my grandmother would give us, for Christmas, it would always be books. And she forgot she'd already given me a whole set of the Bronte sisters.
She gave you a second one?
I'll show you when we go into.
Oh, I would love to see that.
When we go in the other room. Yeah, two. And then she makes notes in all of them, like in this one.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Look at that.
In 1973.
In cursive.
It's in cursive, and it's an old book to begin with. I don't know what edition this was.
They really, I sound old when I say this stuff, and I complain about it all the time at my job at City Lights. They don't make books like this anymore. They're cheap. They're so
I know this is leather bound.
Character. I mean, look at that.
Then with the filigree,
Even the pages.
But she gave this to me. She says, "To Mary Beth, with our love, Big Dad and Mama too." Within these pages, one sees Dickens' mastery of storytelling as it reaches into many fields. The very words of Christmas Carol evoke mind pictures, the same mind pictures with the same figures, whether they are heard in England, America, or in some remote corner of the world. It is a story that touches the heart and belongs to mankind and the ages. As for A Tale of Two Cities, here is history that imprints itself on the mind. Today I remember my mother telling me when I was about your age about Madame Defarge and the horrible knitting. And more than half a century later, I still see the knitting needle move in that ruthless woman's hands. And Sidney Carton's last words, you will remember them as I do, as countless thousands have remembered them. One of the lines of a novel that are recognized wherever they are quoted. Again, it is one of the sorrows of my life that your great-grandmother, Holdsworth, could not have shared this set of Dickens with you, Mama Chu. I mean,
oh my gosh.
And she writes in the beginning of every one, right?
This is amazing.
I know. So, I mean, I was so
special.
Fortunate to have a family that valued, books and stories, and that valued what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's...
because a lot of writers try to it's not lucrative. It's not, as we've talked about, always ego-building. It is not...
It could be ego-destroying.
It can be ego-destroying,
Which can be good, though.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to be said about, when you finally realize... And you actually... I noted this down, a long time ago and on some scrap paper, but I remembered you saying it, that you just don't understand the book business and that it seems kind of random.
Yeah.
What ends up becoming popular. And you said it seems like marketing is the biggest thing, and whatever reaches a big enough market. But I think this is why when I used to work with students as an academic advisor, that was my career before the bookstore.
Okay.
And I would tell them, you need to stop caring whatever outcome you have, because what you're going to do is you're not going to write. You're not going to make music. You're not going to try for a job because you think this nebulous goal of reaching the market.
Right.
But and you said you don't know what market a book has. You just have to write it. But I think that's such an important point, because you were able to feel free to still write despite it not being lucrative or not knowing. And some people have to write in spite of their family or everybody around them, making them feel bad about whatever artistic endeavor.
That's right.
And a lot of people just give up, because why would they want to face opposition from the people that are closest to them, right? If friends were to tell me this podcast is dumb all the time, I would feel less... I mean, I would do it anyway because I'm stubborn. Yeah,
exactly.
But it feels good that people understand. There's something good about whatever creative endeavor a friend or a son or whatever has, and so it's as you're reading these notes, and it makes so much sense now. The
kind of encouragement
how
that I
couldn't
was so
have been
fortunate.
anything else.
I was so fortunate. Well, and I had other ambitions. I was gonna sing, and nobody ever said, play that again. Nobody ever said that's really good because I couldn't sing.
You got to discover what people want to hear more of.
Right. As a kid, you want to do certain things that you think are glamorous, and and then you don't get encouragement if you're no good. And that's what happened to me. But then I would write, something that was, honestly, probably really bad. And they would see something nice in it and say, this is really good. So I think we all start gravitating toward things that we get a little of encouragement about instead of things that nobody comments on.
And it is amazing just how frequently in this project, even my first podcast, which wasn't specific literary, but like this playwright in Mississippi who, life came full circle back to Macomb. That was one of the best interviews I ever did. No one knows about her at all, right? She could have been a big playwright, but she remembered moving to South Carolina, getting a tenured job, and she was trying to write plays that white people would like. No. She's a black woman from Mississippi. But basically she was trying to write plays for everybody but her own people. And at one point, she talked about she had to be buried in the same dirt as her parents, so she moved back right down the road from where she grew up. She's now part of the public school system that she grew up in. And so it was a really interesting detachment from the ambition and goals and just saying actually, I want to write love stories about my people. It was really inspiring, but she was 7 when she wrote her first play.
Yeah.
And her whole family gathered in the living room.
Oh, see,
as if it were a real big deal.
She put on the play,
And to think that is lodged in her memories that even at that age, this is important.
Right.
And people are clapping for me and they want to listen to me. And as you're sharing these books and the love of writing or reading and writing that was instilled in you, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same
people
thing.
that take you seriously.
Mm-hmm. It makes a difference. It makes a big difference to a child.
So special.
And sort of the direction that you are steered.
Oh my gosh, that's so good.
Anyway.
Wow. That's
great definitely
start.
One. That's definitely one. I honestly, I was in high school. I had a horse that I loved and was training, and the horse was tragically killed. Oh. And so then I decided, instead of spending my every day after school with the horses, I was going to run for cheerleader. I ran for cheerleader. I became a cheerleader. And what I remember about this book, this Tale of Two Cities, is I was reading it by the fireplace in our home, and I was late for a game because
Are you
right? I was late for a game.
That is too good.
I know. So that's how much I loved that book, and that was my memory. Of looking at the clock and
what happened?
Oh my
Did you
gosh,
go?
exactly. Oh yeah, I went, but I had to put on my uniform, get my little pom poms.
And was this a football game?
San Marcos High School football
and
game.
Texas football ain't no joke.
Oh yeah,
So they're going to be like, "Why are you reading? We have football."
Yeah, no, I just showed up late.
That's so funny.
It was
I love
pretty loosey. It was a small school, so nobody was really waiting for me. So
that's so great.
Yeah. Anyway.
So what do you got next?
Okay, so I have several. Okay, so this one I loved as an adolescent as well, Precious Babe. Mary Webb is a brilliant writer, and this book is so beautifully written. It's an adult book. I read it to my daughter when she was about 11, and then I was like, oh, I forgot how sexual this is in a way. She was all ears. Trust me, she was all ears. But it's a classic novel. It was written it was published in 1924.
Wow.
So, what it says on the back is like Jane Eyre and Tess of the D'Urbervilles, both of which I loved.
Yeah.
The heroine of Precious Babe is a strong woman whose determined striving for a fuller life breaks the bonds of her confining world. But she is born with a hair lip. So she's not a beautiful heroine,
Yeah.
Born in the wild hill country of Shropshire, Prue Sarn is cursed with a hair lip. Her, quote, precious bane sets her apart from the possibility of marriage and from the superstitious villagers who regard her as queer and outlandish, a witch, particularly once she learns to read and write. Resigned to a life of endless labor on her ambitious brother's farm, Prue loves two things, the remote countryside of her birth, and first hopelessly, then with answering passion, the weaver, Kester Woodsearves. Mary Webb was born in 1881 in Leighton Cressidge, Shropshire. The setting of all her novels, among her best-known works are Gone to Earth and The House in Dormer Forest. Admiring contemporaries, among them Rebecca West, Walter Delamere, and Arnold Bennett, described her as a, quote, strange genius and one of the best living writers. She lived in London, she died in London in 1927. So it's just beautifully written, and it's a wonderful love story. And
I cannot believe I've not heard of this.
Yeah,
and this is right up my alley. Have you heard of Lolly Willows
No,
by Sylvia Townsend Warner?
no.
Okay, the way you're
Sounds like
describing
this,
this,
yeah.
I love these books about women, especially at a time where writing about this was like very
Right.
like cutting edge.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
progressive.
Yeah, uh-huh.
But Lolly Willows is about a woman who does not marry. She's now in her 40s. She lives with her father, and then he dies. So she's basically transferred to her brother.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And so they're in London, I think. And the whole story is where one day she just sits down with her family and says, I'm moving to this strange countryside village. Goodbye. And they're all like freaking out. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And it turns out to be a witch village.
Oh.
But the whole book is kind of like, we think of witch as black magic or, something dark and sinister, when really a witch is making a life of your own. And that people can't stand that. And that's why they call you a witch, because you're doing something that is so
different,
against the grain, what is unexpected of you. And that book was written in the 19 teens. I mean, this was before a lot of the feminist writers.
Yeah.
And I'd never heard of it. And I just picked it up one day at a used bookstore where I live, not where I work, but in my town of Franklin, North Carolina. And I was like, this is incredible. But it was another story.
Tell me the title again.
Lolly Willows.
Okay. All right.
And there's a devil cat in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, she just ups and leaves her family. And it gets so fun. It's a funny book too. Like women that wrote in the late 19th century or early 20th are hilarious. And this Lolly does not want to see her family. And her nephew, who she likes well enough, comes to visit her for way too much time. And she's so upset that he exists. She's like, get away from me. Because the whole idea is the old life's the old life. I'm not that person anymore.
Right.
And he's going to treat her as if, but it is a masterful book. I mean, it is funny, it's witty, and it is a complete subversion of the patriarchy at that time. Yeah. And so as you were describing this, it doesn't have the physical, nature of it.
Yeah.
But when you said witch and people being suspicious of a woman because of
something different. No, it's really beautiful. It's a beautiful love story. And she's just a good writer. I mean, Mary Webb. Anyway,
I am so glad you put me on to that. I'm going to buy this when I get home.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, this might be the next book I read.
I haven't read it since my daughter was 11. But
that's so funny though that you're in the middle of it and you're like, oh, whoops.
Yeah, exactly. No, and then Lizzie's like, huh?
Wow.
So another one I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
I didn't put in there. Have you ever read any of Elizabeth Googe's books?
No.
Okay. So Elizabeth Gouge, this is like a typical, what you would call historical novel. But she is a great writer, and all of her books are fantastic. I would say, probably more read by
Look at that.
teenagers. I know
A picture on the back.
I think this must have been the copy I read, so I don't know. But
is she with her dog on the back?
Yes, she's with
That's so funny.
Yeah. Isn't that great? It's just the fascinating story of Lucy Walter, who was a sort of a secret wife of Charles II, early secret wife. So it's their relationship, and she is a really beautiful, beautiful writer. And it's one of those things where a highly literary writer gets sort of pegged as thrown into the genre thing because most of hers were set in history, but the research. I mean, I assume this is beautifully researched. I mean, she's written a whole lot of books, and
This feels like a you book.
Yeah, I mean, I loved this book. Now I don't know if I've counted it among. I don't know how many I'm at.
Oh, that's okay.
These two are one. Remember,
you can bring in as many as you want, and then we'll pick a 6 to take a picture of.
Okay, all right.
I would say Charles Baxter and I probably talked about 70.
Yeah,
all in all.
Exactly.
I mean, he was getting up and. Yeah. I love that about this. So you take in anything you want, and we'll pick an official 6 at some point.
Okay.
All
right.
But I'm glad you put me onto that because I'd never heard of her.
That's a great book. This True Grit, of course. I mean, and I didn't read True Grit until after I had written I mean, that's how little fiction I have read.
Are you kidding?
No, until after I had written The Which Way Tree. And then everybody started saying, this reminds me
That's
of
so funny.
True Grit.
I was going to say, yeah.
And so I thought, well, I guess I better read True Grit. And so I read it at that point. So,
and?
Yeah, it's one of my favorites now. I mean, probably as far as, what you would call a contemporary novel. And I'm so excited because the Whitliff Collections, which is in San Marcos, which is literary collections, music, and film.
That's a pretty awesome thing.
So
that
they have all my papers. I love them. Bill Whitliff was a fantastic, beautiful person, very dear friend of mine. And they have just acquired the Charles Portis collection.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And now forever in history, you're linked. That's amazing.
Yeah. So
that's so cool.
I'm really excited.
It's always funny when people assume writers who have written a certain story have to have read a certain book before it.
I know.
Because a lot of people have compared you to Lonesome Dove.
Yeah.
Your writing.
Right.
So that's another one.
Charles Portis. Yeah. So, another one that I had not read until after I did that a lot of people say, this is a lot like News of the World.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had not read that book when I wrote mine.
Wow.
And I haven't read any of her other books because I never want to seem like you never know where you got an idea. And I read so much history and research. I want to know that I'm pulling stuff from the real thing, not from somebody else's stuff.
Well, and I remember, I think we talked about this with The Bullet Swallower, that you hadn't read it because it was so close.
Yeah.
Not only with Texas, but just, it could get muddled.
The themes, I don't
and you don't want to do that when you're writing or just in general to have, you want to be certain where the influence came from. And I do get that.
I don't read first person usually because of that.
And I think
the voice can confuse you with what first person from that period of time.
Yeah.
Because it can confuse you with your
weren't you on a panel with Paulette at the Mississippi Book Festival? Because I was at that one. I was like, it was you, her, and Beverly
Lowry,
Yeah.
who's a good friend of mine. Yeah. So she was the moderator, and then Paulette and I were on the panel together. Yeah. So I got.
I finally read one of your books.
Right, exactly. I got to meet her. She was really nice. So that was good. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you're in some good company. Exactly. Not that you want to be compared to people, because you don't want it to seem.
But if you're going to be compared to people, this is
True
Grit.
Nice. Yeah, I mean,
this is kind of nice. Yeah, and I don't go around saying that about myself because, I think people are just always looking for what's sort of similar or whatever, that doesn't mean I can write like Charles Portis. I mean, I'm not claiming I could ever write like Charles Portis.
Yeah, but I get it. We have to label.
People, we
have to make
the booksellers do that. They are the ones that pull those.
Although I will say, I refuse to tell people when I'm selling them a book that they have no idea about. I do not tell them another novel it is like.
Oh, that's nice. That's very nice.
It is way harder to sell a book that way, I've realized, because you just have to rely on the story. And I mean, I suppose if they were to ask whose company it might be in.
Right.
But I like the challenge of being, because I don't want people to read certain authors because they think they're like another one. Because I just I don't read that way.
Right.
Like
you want to know what the story is. You want to know what kind of writing it is.
I've never read one of your books and immediately been like, oh yeah, Lonesome Dove. That's not how my brain. It's just that's what it is. Right. So at any rate, still a good thing to have in the back pocket. Like some people compare me to Charles Portis, so that's good.
They do.
So what do you got next?
Okay. Oh, it's so hard to know. It's so hard to decide. Okay, so this book was the one that influenced the voice of Benjamin.
That's right.
And so that
I'm so glad you brought this in.
I have to say, that I have to include it. It is. I wish I'd marked some passages. The voice is Benjamin developed his own voice. So this is not that same voice, but it is. It has the same spoken quality to it, in that you just hear what he's saying, the same way you just hear what Benjamin's writing. That's when I realized, they have the vocabulary. The grammar is not always, because it wasn't, there's not a lot of schooling.
Exactly.
But the vocabulary is there because most of these people owned a King James Bible.
Yeah.
And, they used large words.
And also, Benjamin had a single book that he had read. Was it Or there were a couple books.
Well, yeah,
It
yeah.
was
He had read
Benjamin Franklin.
Moby Dick, the
And
whale,
Moby Dick,
what
yep.
was called the whale back then. But yeah, he had read that.
So
Yeah, so he has those influences. He has had access to some books, and but mostly he writes like he speaks. That is the way
what's
it is.
what's the title and author of this book?
It's a weird title. It's called Now You Hear My Horn, and it is the Journal of James Wilson Nichols, 1820 to 1887. And he's he's hilarious, and he gets really he was a Union sympathizer. I mean he was not for the joining the Confederacy. But a lot of this in here, it's battles and a lot of violence and a lot of excitement and a lot of things going on.
Where on earth did you hear about this book?
The way I heard about this book was I had in my mind that I wanted to write about this mountain lion, panther attack, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have the voice yet. I didn't know. And I was just poking around upstairs at a ranch house. And this was up there. And my grandmother had given it to my grandfather. With maybe this, I think this is the very same. Yep. To Howard, who would have been a splendid pioneer with much love, Mary, 1968. So she had given it to him, and I started reading it, and I just fell in love with the voice and with the with the turns of phrase and.
So this was like not an aha for the story, but for the language.
But just for the language.
You're
just
like, yep, I got
solely
it.
for the language. And also just for the way people viewed the world. And because with Benjamin, I mean, I couldn't make Benjamin ahead of his time in his thinking toward the Comanches or anything else. They were scared of the Comanches,
Yeah.
And so I get so annoyed with these movies and books that feel like they need to go back and explain, because, you can't judge your characters from our time period with our sentiments and our sensibilities, or we're going to be judged the same way. I'm sure.
No matter,
and that's that's just the way it works.
Thank you for saying this, because it's hard to read a story where it's so obvious that they're trying to pretend like a person who grew up in a place that would not have access to other ideas about other people or politics or war or whatever.
Right.
Like and so I'm like, this is untrue.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, sure, you can write it.
True.
You can write it that way, but like, I don't see what that does. It doesn't give people more honor,
right?
Because the real people still were afraid of the Comanches, or misogynist, or whatever it was.
And I mean, we were clearly doing horrible things.
Yeah,
and they were doing horrible things too. I mean, people are capable of horrible things, no matter who you are.
But it's a good point with Benjamin. It's like you have to be delicate with.
He had to see the world,
and you don't want to make him like such an erudite person that he feels unreal.
No.
And that's what's cool about the letters, is they feel like how he would talk to you if you ran into him in Comfort, Texas.
Right.
At that time.
That's right.
Like if you just stopped through on a wagon,
Has to be honest, yeah.
And I was going to try to go
not
to
apologetic for his viewpoints. I mean,
yes,
you can't, like.
There was no timidness.
I've seen movies like where they're sitting around and they're out there, and so they're fighting. I don't know which indigenous people it was in this particular movie. And then the woman at the table says, well, of course we are, like taking their land, and we are, and you're just like, that's not what she would say.
To be honest, I asked myself in those moments, have you read a history book?
Yeah, exactly. This is not what people were thinking at the time.
And this is why, like, I love literary fiction. I love novels. I love poetry. But, like, you cannot use that as history.
Right.
Now, if someone like you, who not everybody researches like you, or Rachel Beanland, or Elizabeth Gonzalez James, down to like what kind of pants were people wearing in 1880.
Yep.
So you can't take it as fact, but also it's just like, it's awkward to read that, because you're like, what? Why'd you?
Yeah.
It doesn't add anything either.
No.
It's just a confusing.
It's clearly just perfunctory.
And I also think part of the reason I love you as much as Cather and Welty, and I've talked about this with a British friend of mine in Nashville, because we both struggle with having to use such passive language now, and we've gotten roped up into it to qualify every statement so that people can't read into something wrong.
Right.
And in our interview we did years ago, he was like, these writers back then, they just said what they said and left it all up to everybody. They did not matter. They weren't going to use all of this qualifying language to then make an opinion or a statement. They were just going to write. And so, yeah, Benjamin's not going to sit here and explain himself around
Benjamin
all of
isn't
it.
going to do any of that.
Because he can't.
No.
And he wouldn't.
Well, it would just seem so false.
Yeah, so at any rate, I mean, it's the language of it is so, if people listen and they haven't read it, until they do, they won't understand why this is such an exciting thing. Because it's, you just nailed it.
I think so.
And it's so cool that it came from
it's
a peculiar book that you found.
It came from this. So this is this guy. This is his closing paragraph. So he's real mad. I can't remember who he was mad at, but I think he was mad at some kind of corrupt people. And he's going on about the governor. And he gets really carried away. Oh, yeah, that they're depriving women of the grants that their husbands who were supposed to get, something like that. I mean, it was something kind of ahead of it. But, he said, his last paragraph is, now I sometimes think of the past and how I was served by this rotten-hearted, thieving, savage set of hypocritical, fraudulent, perjured, and polluted set, ring-click, C-sesh being secessionist, kid glove, paper collar, brass stud, moving mass of corruption. I say, if they could, through any means, escape the punishment to which their crimes so justly entitle them, then I should lose faith in an omnipotent God and wonder for what purpose hell was instituted. And once more let me say, after they have sinned away their day of grace, let these irreclaimable, hardened, and infamous blackmailers, sane or insane, knaves, tools, or maniacs, go and regale their dubious fancies in the contemplation of their own depravity. So, I know, and he wrote this in, I don't know, he died in 1887, so
that is,
he's talking about the secessionists, and he's talking about, and he's talking about the government, the Texas government, because
what a paragraph.
I know. And so, obviously the whole thing is not written like that.
Yeah.
Like this, I'm just randomly picking a paragraph here. He settled himself in the saddle, bent forward, got the bridle, divested it of the mesquite limb, and about this time we heard one of his pursuers hollow and say, "Stop, Miller, and give up, and you shan't be hurt." He thought the voice was familiar, and, on turning, he saw Antonio Perez, the traitor, and one other in close pursuit. They evidently had no firearms, as they could have shot him 20 times, but they depended on taking him alive by outrunning him. When they saw him change horses, they thought it was a doubtful case. It's spelled D-O-W-T-F-U-L. All this is spelled like that.
I love it.
But redoubling their efforts after hollowing, meaning hollering, they seemed to gain on him. He said it was a lick at Brindle for a while, and the race seemed doubtful until, I imagine he took the situation at a glance and gave his horse his spurs and carried him a few more yards, shook him loose, and he just touched a few of the high places that happened to be in the next 2 miles. And when the horse had begun to run level again, he ventured to look back again, but saw nothing of his pursuers and stopped to let the horse blow a few seconds. It's just very descriptive writing.
You know what? It's like reading one of your paragraphs, and it's not like a.
It's never hokey. It's never
exactly.
hokey.
It's just straightforward.
Yeah, very straightforward.
But it's really interesting. I mean, gosh, and journals are so great of a source for, even if you're just a person interested in life before your time. Not even to write a novel or to make a documentary. And that's the other thing. I think not everything you do has to turn into something.
No, that's
like when
right.
I get your sources from my favorite novelists that they reference that helped make the book, that helped shape the novel, I don't then read it and try to do something with it. I'm just like, this is going to be good for me as a human.
Yeah.
And that's why oral history is really important.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
I remember we debated in a class once, like, oral history is either super utilitarian to some people, like you just it's just to understand very specific things about how humans lived. And there was one oral historian that said, actually, the goal of oral history is to make us fuller human beings. And I tend to look at it that way.
Yeah.
Because I'm a dramatic person.
Makes us better people.
Yeah, and
no
so
question.
I'm just delighted that you brought this one out.
Yeah. This is interesting. I just saw this paragraph. On the west side of the creek, makes in a rough rocky ridge and terminates at the creek in a perpendicular bluff, and there's the oldest looking Indian sign I ever saw. Pictures of men, women, children, animals, characters, C-A-R-R-E-C-T-E-R-S, characters, and hieroglyphics. He knows the words hieroglyphics, and yet he can't spell any of this, in pictures and cut in the bluff. On trees on the east side of the creek is a skirt of various kinds of timber, live oak, hackberry, elm, and box elder. Callahan hated to be outdone, and the Indian Trail led straight for this lost creek. So, anyway, it's just interesting to me, the level of education and the level of, because, it's all phonetically spelled.
Yeah.
And this is just the way he wrote it in 1887.
That's so
Published
cool.
exactly as he did.
Oh my
So anyway,
gosh.
very, very fun book.
I
But
love it.
but it is obviously going to be racist and various other things because it is of its time.
But I
So
think
I don't know
as a-
whether I want to list it as one of my 6 favorite books, but it was very influential in my writing. So I don't know what the criteria is.
I think we're going to do it because part of being an adult and reading is being able to understand that. Like,
Yeah.
you're not, no one's in, I don't read Southern racist books. Actually, Anne Pancake talked about this with one of hers. It was a rare, like, West Virginia, Pennsylvania border story that was about a runaway slave. And it's not so much the racism, but the actual writer was very misogynist. And so that comes through. And so she kept saying, like, oh, if you can handle that. I'm like, look, we need to be able to handle this stuff. It was written at a time where that was given a
what people
pass.
thought, right.
And maybe now a male couldn't write that story with that language in it. But I think some of these books are too important to share
or wouldn't want
to worry about. If that's how fragile your mind is, or that you're going to turn away from everything that isn't exactly up to your current standard of character and morality, which is always a moving target, you can't win. I have no criteria because I trust everybody who I sit across from not to choose anything that is
and not to be
actually-
Benjamin is so non-racist. His sister is half black.
Exactly.
So he's always on the right side, and so it's easy to write from his viewpoint, though he does not say great things about Comanches, particularly because he's scared.
Yeah.
He's scared of them, right? So it makes it easy for me to have other characters who are very racist and who are really bad people,
Yep.
in there, and have Benjamin relating to them. And so by telling the story through his viewpoint, I can still keep within the time period, but have a realistic view of his thinking and of a good person's heart, you know?
And not a perfect person's heart in terms of how we view. But I think it's important, and you referenced it in the first couple of books where you mentioned that your family, right, like gave you books that challenged you, that brought you into the experiences of other people, that world-widening view.
Right.
Most people, especially in the 1800s, they were informed, like their lives were informed by what was in front of them. So they didn't have access to literature. And that's why books are so important. It's because you could be isolated. Right. Even Curtis, who started this project is based on him. He told me he read a book, The Fifth Chinese Daughter. He grew up in Union Springs, Alabama, which was so rural. And at that point in the 50s, it's not like you had a ton of stories. Like, you only knew the white people you knew. Right. You only knew the neighbors you knew that were black. You might not know someone from Pakistan or anything.
Right.
But that book, he talked about how a fiction helped him deal with the mundane situation of the rural South. I've always loved that phrasing. But to think that so many of these people didn't have these stories to help them see Comanches in a different way.
Right.
Or women in positions of power, whatever the bias we would perceive.
Right.
Obviously, there's a reason for that. And I guess what's the point of harping on, I don't know. It just really bothers me when then you have to be like, okay, well, let's just write every story where. Well,
and, we have our own sensibilities in this generation. We've learned. But that was pre-understanding. I'm sure we will also be judged for our false, understanding of the world at some point as things evolve.
But I hope they write us real.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
I don't want to be
whitewashed. Yeah, exactly.
No.
And made perfect. I know. No, we're not. Okay, so that makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think that's 6. I want to just share one other thing.
Please do. Yeah.
Obviously, I read all of these Marguerite Henry books on horses. So great. There's this one passage that I always just think is brilliant by somebody who's a dear friend of mine, Jeff Long. My favorite book of his is Angels of Light, which was his first novel. He's a climber. He was, just a really good person. Does a lot of climbing novels. But the beginning of this book, which I didn't think was his best book, but the opening pages are, it's a climber who falls. And
Oh gosh.
yeah, and as far as just the impeccable beauty of words, he nails it every time. So this is just the very beginning. When God throws angels down, it starts like this. A breeze stirs. It carries the slightest distraction, a scent of trees perhaps, or a hint of evening chill, or a song on a radio in a car passing almost 4,000 feet below. In some form, temptation always whispers. High above the earth, toes smeared against the stone, fingers crimped on microholds, the woman turns her head. Not even that, she turns her mind for an instant, for even less. That's all it takes. The stone evicts her. The wall tilts, the sky bends. Her holds don't hold. She falls. By now, 8 days high, her body is burning adrenaline like common sugar, one more fuel in her system. So in the beginning of her fall, she doesn't even register fear. She is calm, even curious. Every climber knows this rupture. One moment you have contact, the next it's outer space. That's what rope is for. She waits. Her mind catches up with her body. A first thought forms, a natural. My hands. All our lives from the cradle to the grave, our hands are our most constant companions, like the back of my hand. They give, they take, they roam and shape the world around us, but hers have turned to stone, or time has stopped. Each finger is frozen just so, still hooking on holds that no longer exist. Her high arm is still stretched high, her low arm still bent low. One leg is cocked, the other is straight to the tiptoe of her climbing slipper. She could be a statue of a dancer tipped from its pedestal. Her paralysis does not alarm her. Hollywood shows victims swimming through air, limbs splayed and paddling. In reality, when a climber is climbing, really climbing, not fretting the fall but totally engaged, and the holds blow and you peel, what happens is like a motor locking. Rigor is the formal term. As in rigor mortis, your muscles stiffen, body memory freezes. At least for a moment. It doesn't matter what your mind knows. Your body stubbornly believes it is still attached to the world. What surprises her is the length of the moment. Time stretches like a rubber band. The moment is more than a moment, more than two. Patience, she tells herself.